Welcome in another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman here with my final position unit ranking. The top 10 secondaries in college football entering the 2025 season, combining corners and safeties into one ranking here at Dalton. And this is a pretty loaded list, honestly.
Yeah, it is. You look at every single team on this list, and I'm sure even a few that you had to leave off, and you go, wow, there's some really talented secondaries. And obviously, look, in today's game, if you can't cover, you're not going to be able to succeed much on defense with all the high-flying offenses and all the great quarterbacks we have in college football. So a very important list here, especially for a lot of the elite defenses that are looking to win national championships.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to remind you guys right now, we actually broke down my top 10 corners and my top 10 safeties in their own individual episodes. You want to check out the individual player list. This is combining them all into one ranking and saying, okay, which schools have the best secondaries in college football going into next year. And also want to remind you guys, all of the stats we talk about today here on the show are available to you guys with a PFF Plus subscription at subscribe.pff.com. Get full access to grades and advanced metrics on every single player in college football and the NFL, dating all the way back to the 2014 season for college football, dating all the way back to the 2006 season for the NFL, and access to our 2026 mock draft simulator where you can draft a lot of these defensive backs for your favorite team today as well. All right, my honorable mention secondary in college football going into next year is the Tennessee Volunteers, who kind of have an asterisk next to their name right now because their top defensive back, Jermod McCoy, my number 2 corner in college football, he tore his ACL in January. Kind of uncertain as to how much he'll play, if at all, in the 2025 season. But when healthy, like I said before, is my number 2 corner in the country. 89.6 coverage grade last year. Second among returning Power 4 corners. 4 interceptions, tied for second among returning Power 4 corners as well. Tennessee also has a few other starters returning in cornerback Ricky Gibson III, safety Andre Turrentine, and slot corner Boo Carter. Gibson was 9th among SEC corners last year with a 76.3 coverage grade. So still a very good secondary even without Jermod McCoy, but he obviously makes this unit one to be that's worth mentioning here.
Absolutely. And you're talking about a team with a lot of experience, like you mentioned, with Gibson, with Carter, with Turrentine still returning. This is going to be a good defense and a very good secondary. We have a lot more questions for Tennessee on offense than we do on defense, but losing the superstar in McCoy, I'm assuming that's what kept them out of the top 10 of this list, right? When you have McCoy healthy, this is a top 10 secondary, so it's worth mentioning them. It's really hard to lose your superstar player for most, if not all, of the season, and a guy who's a potential first-round pick and really broke out last year after transferring in from Oregon State. But still going to be a good unit, still going to be a good defense as a whole, and a really good secondary. It's just going to be a little bit harder without McCoy.
I mentioned before my number 2 corner in the country, Jermod McCoy. He would be my number 1 corner in the draft because my number 1 corner, who we'll talk about a little bit later, Leonard Moore from Notre Dame, is only a true sophomore, not eligible to be picked until 2027. So Jermod McCoy would be CB1 in the 2026 draft if he's fully healthy. So hopefully he gets fully healthy for the 2025 season. At number 10, though, is the Penn State Nittany Lions, who have a star corner in their own right, and A.J. Harris, who also, like Jermod McCoy, could be a first-round pick in this upcoming draft. He transferred to Penn State from Georgia last year. He was a top 40 recruit coming out of high school, barely played in his freshman year at Georgia, played a lot for Penn State as a sophomore, and was one of the 10 most valuable corners in the nation, according to our wins above average metric. He only allowed 0.76 yards per coverage snap. On the other side, who I think could be a breakout star in college football, is Elliott Washington II. He was one of the 10 most valuable Big Ten corners last year, according to our wins above average metric, despite not even starting for Penn State's defense. So he wasn't even a starter for Penn State and was still one of the 10 most valuable corners in the conference. Zakee Wheatley is back at safety. He was 10th among all safeties in America last year with an 87.7 run defense grade. And Zion Tracy spent 292 snaps in the slot for Penn State last year. He'll be in that role once again for the Nittany Lions. And Dalton, Zakee Wheatley has actually a graphic from PFF as his screensaver right now, because we actually put out our 10 safeties no in the draft next year. He was not on that list. That is actually a screensaver right now, apparently, according to his dad on Twitter. So some motivation for Zeke Willie. He's a great player. I want to put that out right there. Right, great player, and he's a big reason why Penn State's a top 10 secondary in the country.
The one time you didn't work a Penn State player into one of your top 10 position rankings, and of course now it's motivation for the season. But look, it goes to show you again how loaded this Penn State defense is. I think it does start with that pair of corners, though. When you talk about A.J. Harris and Elliott Washington on the outside, that's really a solid core to work with. And they played a lot of man coverage last year under Tom Allen. Now you've got Jim Knowles coming in. We'll see how he likes to mix it up in coverage, but there's plenty of talent for him to work with. We'll see if it's necessarily the same amount of talent as he had Ohio State last year, but I'll tell you what, when you're starting a secondary with Harris and with Washington on the outside, and then obviously you've got a guy like Wheatley at safety, even though they're replacing a couple of safeties, Kevin Winston, who didn't play much last year, and Jalen Reed also got drafted to the Houston Texans. So got to figure things out on the back end, but we know Jim Knowles knows how to call plays, did a great job with that Ohio State defense, and I expect the same there at Penn State.
Yeah, top 10 corner in A.J. Harris, a rising star at corner in Elliott Washington, and a safety who I still really like in Zeke Wheatley, who now has added motivation from not being on our 10 safeties.
Top 15?
I'll give him that.
Top
Absolutely.
15.
Yeah, absolutely.
You didn't write it down, so maybe it still kind of hurts a little. But
yeah, it still hurts a little, of course, but Zeke Wheatley's still a great player for Penn State secondary, a big reason why they're top 10 here. All right, number 9 is Georgia, who also has a great safety. Even after losing a first-round safety in Malachi Starks, Georgia has a star at safety in KJ Bolden, who is a top 5 safety in the country, in our opinion, going into next year, a true sophomore as well. He was a top 10, top 15 recruit coming out of high school, the number 1 safety coming out of high school. He showed why in his freshman year. He was the 8th most valuable returning Power 4 safety, according to our wins above average metric, as only a true freshman. 13 coverage stops, tied for the 5th most among all safeties in college football last year. Georgia also brought back both of its starting corners in Dalen Everett and Daniel Harris. Dalen Everett had 3 picks last year, tied for 5th among all corners in the SEC. They also brought in Adrian Maddox from UAB. He was 9th among all safeties in the country last year with an 89.5 coverage grade. And you have a guy in Ellis Robinson IV entering his true sophomore year, or probably his redshirt freshman year, honestly. He was the number 2 overall recruit in the 22-24 high school class, only behind Jeremiah Smith, and Ellis Robinson IV is the highest rated cornerback recruit since Vernon Hargreaves in 2013. So highest rated corner coming out of high school in 11 years will be probably a backup for Georgia this year.
Kirby Smart's always got him, doesn't he? I mean, when you talk about, look, you start with those stars that you mentioned, with Harris, with Dalen Everett, who I thought really came on late in the season, especially in man-to-man coverage, and then KJ Bolden kind of taking the leadership role from Malachi Starks after he got drafted in the first round this past draft. I think you're really looking at a Georgia team. Look, it's predictable that they'd be on the top 10 of this list. There's some years they're even higher. They're a little bit young this year, especially at safety, but they're going to be just fine with Kirby Smart running the show and the amount of talent, like you mentioned, they always have cycling through there. Georgia's still going to be a serious problem when you try to throw the football on them.
Yeah, they could be even higher on this list, honestly, with Adrian Maddox, who I really like coming in from UAB, a great cornerback room. And if Ellis Robinson really lives up to the hype he had coming out of high school, could be a lot higher on this list. We have Brandon Hallam in the chat right now. He's usually always predicting correctly my list. He says, I have no clue about these groups today, so no guesses from him today.
Okay, all right. Well,
I like it,
take a step. Georgia probably would have been a pretty safe guess.
Brandon Hallam is batting 1,000 in the chat right now. I like him not taking a swing here.
Taking a day off. Maybe he'll get back in on Thursday for our PFF College 50. How many of the top 50 can he get?
I appreciate him not, taking a shot here. If he doesn't know, you don't know, right? The other ones he was nailing every single one, so kind of creating the keeping the perfect streak alive.
Don't make bets you can't win. I like that.
I do that a lot, unfortunately. So, good strategy there from Brandon Hallam. All right, number 8 is Duke, actually. Duke has a really good secondary in college football going into next year. Duke, one of 3 schools in the country who has both a top 10 corner and a top 10 safety in my rankings. Texas and Alabama, who we'll talk about much later on this list, they were the other 2 schools who had that. Chandler Rivers, my number 5 returning corner in college football, he tied with Jahdae Barron, first-round pick Jahdae Barron, for the best PFF grade among all corners in the Power 4 last year with a 90.7 PFF grade. Terry Moore, my number 7 returning safety in college football. He led all Power 4 safeties with a 90.1 PFF grade. So the highest graded corner in the Power 4 last year and the highest graded safety in the Power 4 last year, both of them coming back to Duke for another year. Blue Devils also added a transfer from Sam Houston State in safety Caleb Weaver. He was 8th among all safeties in the country last year with an 89 run defense grade. But really, Dawn, why Duke is here in the top 10, they have 2 superstars in Chandler Rivers and Terry Moore.
Absolutely, and you look at what Manny Diaz did with this unit in his first year as their head coach. 6th best coverage grade in the Power 4 last year. Here's the list of teams ahead of them: Texas, Notre Dame, Oregon, TCU, Alabama. All of those teams, like Duke, won at least 9 games, several of them in the playoffs. So you're talking about a Manny Diaz outfit that just is spectacular. They blitz a lot. They get in a lot of different zone coverage looks. They're one of the best zone coverage teams in the country. I think Chandler Rivers especially is a superstar. This is somebody who needs to be talked about both this season and for the upcoming NFL draft next year. A spectacular, heady player with great eyes out there at corner and zone coverage. Terry Moore as well back there at free safety. I mean, you're talking about a Duke team. Yeah, they went and got Darian Mensah as the quarterback. They're rebuilding this offense, but Manny Diaz in this defense and this secondary especially is the foundation. The only team that really tore him up last year was Miami, and that's Cam Ward, the number 1 overall pick. Nobody could stop them last year. So this is a great team, or defense, I should say, that Duke has. They just have to match it on the other side consistently.
And you need that secondary for a Manny Diaz defense, considering Manny Diaz is one of the most aggressive defensive play callers we have in college football in terms of how often he blitzes. You cannot blitz that often unless you have a great secondary behind them because of how many pass rushers you're sending. You need to have a good 4 or 5 defensive backs out there. He has that at Duke, especially with 2 stars in Chandler Rivers and Terry Moore. Again, the highest graded players at their position in the Power 4 last year, and they're both coming back to school for another year too. So number 8 is Duke. Number 7, another surprise team last year, made it all the way to the college football playoff. Really big reason why it was their secondary. Indiana checks in here at number 7. D'Angelo Pons is the star of that secondary. He's my number 3 corner in college football going into next year. He has a 91.8 PFF grade across his first 2 seasons of college football at James Madison, and then Indiana as a true sophomore, the highest among all returning corners in the country. They also returned another starter in safety, Amari Farrell. He had 4 picks last year, tied for the 6th most among all safeties in the Power 4. They also are bringing in a couple transfers who probably start for them: slot cornerback Devin Boykin from NC State and safety Lewis Moore from Ole Miss. Devin Boykin missed all of last year with a torn ACL, but the year before at NC State, he was 4th among all safeties in the country with a 90.5 run defense grade. Lewis Moore didn't really play much for Ole Miss last year. He actually started for Indiana in 2023 and had a very solid 73.3 PFF grade that year. So he actually left Indiana for Ole Miss. Now he's back at Indiana going into next year too. But really, Dalton, the big reason why Indiana's here at number 7, D'Angelo Pons is one of the best defensive backs in college football.
Absolutely. If I was making a short list of my favorite players in college football, D'Angelo Pons might be number 1. And look, he's undersized, but he's one of the most technically sound players at any position in the country. Not afraid of anybody. We saw that even in Indiana's matchup against his high school teammate, Jeremiah Smith, and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Look, you've got one of the best corners in the country and a unit that just excels at executing their job. They're one of the highest zone coverage rates in the country last year. They rotate a lot. They give quarterbacks different looks. They cause a lot of confusion. Not a ton of man-to-man coverage, but they execute at such a high level in Kurt Cignetti's defense that with the talent coming back, we have to expect them to do it again. And honestly, this entire Indiana defense, I know a lot of the talk's been about Fernando Mendoza and some of the transfers in on offense, but this defense is the reason that they could compete in the Big Ten and compete for a playoff spot again. It starts up front in that D-line that we already talked about with Mikael Kamara and those guys, but Pons in this secondary is a really darn good unit, and they're going to be good again this year with as well as they execute.
Yeah, they have a great secondary going into next year. D'Angelo Pons, I would say the biggest dog in college football. Only 5'9", only 170 pounds, but he is just so feisty out there, man. He does not play like he's that small, honestly. He plays outside corner for Indiana when usually that size would make you play slot corner. He plays on the outside and is one of the best outside corners in college football and a great run defender too, despite being that small. So Indiana here at number 7. At number 6, another school in the Big Ten, the Oregon Ducks, who brought in my opinion, the best defensive back from the portal in Purdue safety, Dylan Thieneman. My number 3 safety in college football 89.4 PFF grade across his first 2 years, is fourth among all returning safeties in the country. They also brought in 2 other transfers who will probably start for them in the secondary, and Theron Johnson coming in from Northwestern, the cornerback, and slot corner Jaden Kennedy from Ole Miss. Theron Johnson was 9th among Big Ten corners last year with a 79.4 coverage grade. Kennedy's 8 pass breakups tied for 8th among all corners in the SEC. Jaleel Florence only played 3 snaps last year in 2024 due to a knee injury, but the year before, he had a very solid 72.6 grade on 392 snaps for the Ducks. And Oregon also has a plenty of former highly rated recruits, a couple 5-stars actually, in cornerback Naeem Offord and safety Trey McNutt in their secondary too. So a couple former 5-star recruits that are providing depth in that secondary. Dylan Thiedemann, one of the best defensive backs in the country at safety as well. And you brought in a couple really other good transfers. Theron Johnson, who I really like from Northwestern, and Jaden Kennedy from Ole Miss too.
Yeah, and they have to replace a lot of starters in this Oregon secondary. But you mentioned it. If Pons is one of my favorite players in the country for Indiana, Thiedemann is certainly up there with him. I still think he's arguably the best single high safety in the country. Purdue used him a little bit out of position, a little more in the box last year as they were trying to piece it together. Had one of the worst defenses in the country as a unit, but Thiedemann is still a star player, and I think he should be the backbone of this secondary. And then you mentioned guys like Johnson and Kennedy putting it together at corner. Dan Lanning's going to figure it out, right? He came up under Kirby Smart. He's a defensive mastermind. They're going to figure out who needs to play, but I think with Thiedemann as the backbone and a lot of these other transfers and new starters coming in, Oregon's still going to be really good on the back end.
They're going to be really, really good. Dylan Thiedemann had kind of a down sophomore year at Purdue, but I want to remind people, really, I think it was by his alignment. And Purdue was kind of a disaster everywhere on that team last year. He played far more free safety in his true freshman year, where he shined in his true freshman year at Purdue. Played a lot more in the box this past year. I think Dan Lanning will be very smart, and he's one of the smartest defensive coaches we have. He'll be very smart to put Dylan Thiedemann as a true center fielder for his defensive free safety next year, and a lot of single high coverage. I think that's where Thiedemann really shines, is in that role. All right, kind of recap, 10 through 6. My honorable mention was Tennessee, number 10, Penn State, number 9, Georgia, number 8, Duke, number 7, Indiana, and number 6, Oregon. Before we get to the top 5 of this list, got to talk about the sponsor of the show. That is Fabric by Gerber Life. What does your child's future success look like to you? A job they're passionate about, traveling around the world, or just being happy and comfortable? Whatever their journey, you're going to make it easier to achieve with a kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. By making a contribution to your child's future today, you can help give them the means to pursue their dreams, big and small. Fabric by Gerber Life is designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids can't invest when they're minors, but a kids investment account allows them to invest on their behalf now, giving their investments more time to grow. It's all online, and setting up an account can take you just 5 minutes. Then you can manage your child's account and monitor their investments right from your phone. Start with just $20 with no contribution limits, tax advantages, and your funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000. Plus, no commission fees and just a low, flat monthly maintenance fee. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFcollege. That's meetfabric.com/PFFcollege, meetfabric.com/PFFcollege. Portfolios managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, number 5 of my top 5 list right here is the defending national champion, Ohio State Buckeyes. They have, in my opinion, in their secondary, the best defensive player in college football. And the reason why I'm not saying he's the best player in college football is because his teammates on the other side of the ball and Jeremiah Smith. But Caleb Downs, number 2 player in the country, best defensive player in the country. He is a superstar at safety for the Buckeyes. Over the last 2 years, he is the most valuable safety in the nation, according to our wins above average metric. 91.7 PFF grade is second among all safeties in the country. In that span, 91.2 coverage grade is third. And remember, first 2 years of college football playing at Alabama and Ohio State in some massive games, he was still that good at those 2 schools. Davison Igbinosun at corner is back for another year. He tied for 4th among all Big Ten corners with 8 pass breakups last year. Jermaine Matthews Jr. will be the other starting outside corner. He had a 70 PFF grade on 396 snaps last year. Lorenzo Styles Jr. will play in the nickel for Ohio State. He had a 78.1 run defense grade on 162 snaps last year, too. And then next to Caleb Downs, the safety, will likely be true sophomore Jalen McLean. He had an 82 coverage grade on only 107 snaps as a true freshman. And Ohio State brings in the number 1 cornerback recruit in the 2025 high school class and 5-star Devin Sanchez, too. But a big reason why, Dalton, they're here in the top 5. Caleb Downs is the best defensive player in the country.
You're right. We talked about Dylan Thieneman being the backbone of Oregon's defense. Well, there's no better backbone to have than Caleb Downs, especially with all of the roles that he can play. He can play back deep. He can get in the box. He kind of served as their deep-ish kind of middle linebacker in the playoff run last year for Jim Knowles. And I think it really comes down to, and I think you summed it up right, Caleb Downs and Davison Igbinosun as the returning starters, and then some inexperience behind it, right? Jermaine Matthews played less than 400 snaps last year. Jalen McLean didn't play a whole lot. You've got some guys that are coming in that are inexperienced. They're very talented, no question. They're Ohio State, but this is going to be built around Downs. I think the one thing I'm looking for is for them to be better on the outside, right? You couldn't throw over the middle of the field on them last year with Downs and obviously Lathan Ransom back there as well, Jordan Hancock in the slot, but 2 of those guys are gone, and you're talking about a team that if there was one weakness last year, it was cornerback in defending out towards the numbers. So Matthews and Igbinosun, I think, play a really big role as the next 2 most experienced players behind Downs and being better in man-to-man situations.
I think Devin Sanchez, too. If Jermaine Matthews doesn't really play that well, I think Devin Sanchez could see a lot of playing time as a true freshman. As the number 1 corner coming out of high school, I think that could be a guy. And at a position at Ohio State, too, where, I like Igbinosun and I like the potential of Jermaine Matthews, but, if neither one of them, I think, are true superstars right now, if they don't perform up to their level that Ohio State's looking for, I think that Devin Sanchez could see a lot of playing time next year as a true freshman.
Need to cut down on penalties out there on the outside for sure, especially for Igbinosun. 16 penalties, which I believe led the nation. I'm pretty sure. If it didn't, I'm sure it's awfully close because that's a whole lot even for the extended run they had.
Yes, the reason why Ohio State's not a little bit higher on this list, even though they have the best defensive back in the country and Caleb Downs by a mile, in my opinion, is because some other inexperienced players in that secondary, but still a lot of talent in that secondary too, still deserves a place in the top 5. At number 4 is the Clemson Tigers, who have a really impressive group of corners down there in Death Valley. Avion Terrell, my number 4 corner in the country going into next year. He's a younger brother of A.J. Terrell, the Atlanta Falcons star cornerback. Avion Terrell, 4th among all corners in the country with a 90.7 run defense grade, 3 forced fumbles, tied for 2nd among all corners in the country as well. He's a really good player in coverage. He led the Power 4 with 14 forced incompletions in 2024. I think this guy will be a first-round pick in the 2026 NFL draft. Opposite of him is true sophomore Ashton Hampton, who had a 45.7 passer rating allowed as a true freshman. That was 8th among all corners in the Power 4. Slot corner Khalil Barnes is back for another year. He kind of had a sophomore slump last year with only a 61.1 PFF grade, but the year before, only Caleb Downs was a more valuable true freshman safety in the nation than Khalil Barnes, according to our wins above average metric. Clemson also brought back Jaden Lucas at corner 2. He was a starter for the Tigers last year as well. A little more uncertain at safety for Clemson, but Kylan Griffin played 375 snaps a year ago, and Ricardo Jones had a 70.2 PFF grade on 150 snaps as a true freshman. But really, Dawn, the reason why they're here at number 4 might be the best group of corners of anyone in the country.
Clemson's got a boatload of talent. I know we've been talking about it all off season, but that extends to the secondary too. And I think when you talk about what they have on the outside, especially in Terrell and Hampton, you don't get much better than that. I'm not seeing a whole lot of ACC units that are going to consistently get open against them. I think the one question for me with Clemson is the one guy that they lost in R.J. Mickens, right? To me, he was the glue that held the whole thing together. He was the one senior bit of leadership in that secondary. So whoever can replace that leadership at safety, especially maybe it is a guy like Khalil Barnes, right, who's been around for a while too. Now, I think that's really the one question I have is that Mickens in the middle called the shots and was the leader of that unit, a bunch of really young kids that played well last year. Now they all have to mature together without Mickens as their leader, figure it out as a unit, especially back there at safety. But you're right, this group of corners, that's as fearsome as it gets. I mean, it's going to be really hard to throw between their D-line and their secondary. Good luck throwing on Clemson this year.
If they still had R.J. Mickens, maybe
no, they'd be number one.
Yeah.
They would absolutely be number one if Mickens had one more year.
Yeah, so
I don't think I have any question about that.
The one question I have is safety for them. I still like what they have in safety too, but their corners are fantastic.
It's just, again, Mickens brought and he broke out last year with the huge grade, and it got him drafted to the Chargers, but he was the leader. When I watched them, and you had all these talented guys on the outside, but he was the glue that held it together. Can they keep it together with him graduated now? But the good news is all those guys coming back. We know guys don't generally transfer out of Clemson. Yeah. They've all played together for a full year already, so they just have to put it together as a unit without their veteran leader now.
I mean, you got Avion Terrell, Ashton Hampton, Khalil Barnes as your starting three corners.
That'll do.
I think that's the best in the country. I really do. I think that's an incredible group of corners that Clemson has right there. They're number 4 on this list. At number 3, a school that really relied on their coverage unit to make it all the way to the national title game, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, checking here at number 3. And really, Dalton, I said it before, 2 reasons why Notre Dame made it all the way to the national title game last year. Run game, secondary.
Yep.
And they have Jeremiah Love coming back, my number 2 running back unit in the country, a great offensive line, too, blocking for them, and my number 3 secondary in the country. The blueprint is going to be the same thing for Notre Dame going into next year, too. Really, the reasons why Notre Dame's here number 3, the best corner in America plays for the Fighting Irish in Leonard Moore. Former 3-star recruit coming out of high school, but he finished his true freshman year as the 3rd most valuable corner in the country, according to our wins above average metric. The only 2 who are more valuable than Leonard Moore last year were Jahdae Barron and Travis Hunter, 2 first-round picks in the 2025 NFL draft. So Leonard Moore is the most valuable returning corner in America going into next year. He was really good in man coverage, though. He had 82.5 grade in man coverage, 3rd among all corners in college football. They also brought back their other starting outside corner in junior Christian Gray, coming back for another year, too. Starting in the slot for Notre Dame will be Alabama transfer Devontae Smith. Not that Devontae Smith, a different Devontae Smith from Alabama. He was one of 5 corners in the SEC last year who earned 70-plus grades, both in coverage and in run defense. And yes, Notre Dame did lose their star safety Xavier Watts to the NFL, but they brought back their other starting safety in Aiden Schuler. 53.9 passer rating allowed last year, top 25 mark in the Power 4. So you brought back the best corner in the country, and Leonard Moore is only a true sophomore, too. You brought back your other starting out corner, too, in Christian Gray, a really good slot corner in Devontae Smith, and then Aiden Schuler, who I think is a really good safety, too, for Notre Dame, is definitely worthy of being a top 3 secondary.
Absolutely. I mean, Schuler coming back at safety. You mentioned Moore outside at corner. You can't do much better at replacing Jordan Clark in the slot than they did with Devontae Smith. I think really the big question is going to be the transition at defensive coordinator from Al Golden to now Chris Ash. But Ash has been a great coach for a long time, won a national title in 2014 as Ohio State's co-defensive coordinator. So he certainly knows what he's doing with defensive backs. We'll see if they play as much man-to-man coverage as they did under Golden. But regardless of what system they're running or what scheme they're running, they've got a boatload of talent in Notre Dame's secondary. The defense as a whole, we went over their linebacker unit last week. I think the secondary is just as good, if not better, especially with Moore and Gray out there on the outside. I think it's going to be another year where if you're going to beat Notre Dame, you better find a way to run the football, because throwing on them in obvious passing situations is not going to work.
I love the addition too of Devontae Smith coming in from Alabama. I wonder if he transferred there only saying, "Listen, I'm a great player in my own right. I don't want to be compared to the Heisman Trophy winner from
I'm sure he heard it all the time down there in Tuscaloosa for sure. Especially playing on the other side, playing corner instead of receiver.
Yes.
Like, no, I don't play offense.
And the same spelling too. Like I think the V is capitalized just like Devontae Smith. It's brutal.
I'll tell you what, if you're going to be a corner, you're going to Notre Dame. That's the right place to be right now.
Yeah.
Under Marcus Freeman, now Chris Ash instead of Al Golden, and just what Notre Dame has had going in the secondary. I'm telling you, we're going to be saying it all year this year again. You don't want to be throwing on Notre Dame. No. You don't want it to be in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9 on Notre Dame, because you're going to have a serious problem catching up from behind if you're throwing the football all the time and just dropping back.
Jordan Clark was a great player for them, but Devontae Smith is a great player as well, starting in the slot for Notre Dame. And they also have the best outside corner in the country in Leonard Moore, too. Notre Dame is number 3. Devontae Smith, his former school, checks in at number 2 on this list. Alabama, my number 2 secondary in the country. Mentioned before, Clemson might have the best group of corners in the country. Bama, I would say, has the best group of safeties in the country between Bray Hubbard and Keon Sabb. Bray Hubbard, my number 6 safety in college football going into next year. He was 6th among all safeties in the country in both overall grade with an 89.2 PFF grade and an 89.7 coverage grade, which is also 6th in the country this past year. 21.3 passer rating allowed, was 5th among all FBS safeties as well. Keon Sabb missed the final 6 games of this past season due to an injury, but the year before, he was my number 9 safety in college football. And while at Michigan in 2023, he was one of 6 Power 5 safeties who had 80-plus grades both as a coverage defender and as a run defender. It's only a true sophomore that year. And he was actually pretty upset, Dalton, that he was not in my top 10 safeties list when we put that out already. He would have been in the top 15 or so, I would have said. Keon Sabb's a great player, too.
Might have to expand the list next year.
Players get mad at me
You're really upsetting some people.
I know.
Man, oh, man.
I know. I feel like you out here, man, honestly. But, no, Bama, I love their safety group. And they also have a really good cornerback group, too. Cameron Calhoun transferring in from Utah, my number 10 returning corner in college football. He had an 82.8 PFF grade last year at Utah as a redshirt freshman. He was 10th among all corners in the Power 4 with that grade. And Bama brought back both of their starting outside corners in Damani Jackson and Xavier Brown. Xavier Brown was a true freshman last year, had a 70.7 coverage grade as a true freshman. Really impressive mark from the former 5-star recruit. Deshaun Jones will be the new slot corner for Alabama after Devontae Smith left. He was 2nd among all corners in the SEC with an 82 tackling grade last year. And Alabama also has a couple of former 5-star recruits as well in sophomore safety Xavier Mincy and freshman cornerback Dijon Lee. Best safety group in the country, and a lot of experience and a lot of talent in that cornerback room, too.
Yeah, I think the first thing with the safeties, which is the funny part, is Keon Sabb's injury actually opened the door for Bray Hubbard to play last year, and now I think the two of them playing together, it's going to be a great compliment with Sabb as the free safety, and I think Hubbard is more that box safety, and he's a spectacular tackler who really, he cut his teeth on special teams first, and then figured out, okay, I can really play at strong safety here, and he was terrific last year. And let's just get a word on how deep this cornerback room is. Jalen Mbakwe earned a 68 PFF grade last year at corner. He's moving to receiver this year.
Yeah.
They're flipping sides of the ball with him, and they still feel good about that because they have Jackson, because they have even a guy like Red Morgan who played a decent amount last year, right? Cam Calhoun, like you mentioned, really talented player from Utah. This team has a rotation of defensive, either a rotation or a competition this summer of defensive backs where they should almost always have an elite unit out there, barring a bunch of injuries. But they've got talent, they've got depth. Alabama's got everything on defense you could ask for. We've talked about it with all 3 layers of this, and this secondary might actually be the best unit of the 3.
Alabama's the only school in America that has a top 10 D tackle, top 10 edge rusher, top 10 linebacker, top 10 safety, and a top 10 corner for me. That nobody else in the country has that. So Bama's defense is loaded next year.
They're loaded. Look, I'll keep saying it. There's questions at quarterback and running back, but I absolutely love the rest of their roster.
Yes.
I think there is
the best line in the country for me.
I know they were the first team to miss out on the playoff last year. They should have full expectations this year of making it.
And Big Toe actually made a great comment in our chat right now, Dalton, saying Cameron Calhoun, yeah, he's great. He might not even start. I've seen a lot of depth charts for Alabama right now. He's not even listed as a starter. So a top 10 corner for me in the country is listed as some depth charts as a backup for them.
Well, and that's a luxury because he's still going to play, no question.
Yes.
I mean, this team, they played a ton of corners last year. They have a ton of talented corners. Somebody turns an ankle. If you're turning to Cam Calhoun when somebody gets hurt, you're in a really good spot. And he did that last year at Utah as a true freshman, wasn't he? Redshirt freshman. Yeah. I mean, and he was really, when starting out the year, he was the 3rd corner at Utah and didn't play, 700-800 snaps like some guys, but he was still fantastic. And I think to have a guy like that, even if he's in your back pocket, just look at the depth of this secondary. This Alabama defense, they just got to execute. The only thing I question a little bit is maybe pass rush depth, but this might be the best defense in the country.
I mean, they brought back almost everyone from that secondary besides like Devontae Smith, from that secondary last year, and it was already one of the best secondaries in the country. And then you add in a top 10 corner in the country in Cameron Calhoun. Yeah, it is a loaded secondary in Tuscaloosa next year for Alabama. All right, number 1 though is the Texas Longhorns. Texas has the number 1 linebacker unit in the country for me, and now the number 1 secondary in the country for me, which means Texas has pretty easily the best back 7 in college football going into next year. And they still have a great defensive line, too, headlined by my number 1 edge defender in Colin Simmons. But the secondary has my number 4 safety in the country in Michael Taft, my number 6 corner in the country in Malik Muhammad. Michael Taft was the sport's 4th most valuable safety in the nation last year, according to our wins above average metric. Only Caleb Downs was a more valuable returning safety than Michael Taft last year. And Malik Muhammad is the 4th most valuable returning Power 4 corner since 2023, his first 2 years of college football, according to our wins above average metric as well. And then starting in the slot will be, Jalen Gilbo, who started in the slot for them last year. He'll be moving to outside corner this year, a lot like Jahdae Barron did for Texas too. So he's kind of doing what he did. And then at nickel will be junior Jelani McDonald. He had an 89.1 run defense grade last year, tied for 6th among all safeties in the country. The other safety spot is a little up for grabs right now next to Michael Taft, but keep an eye on redshirt sophomore Derek Williams Jr. He only played in 4 games this past season due to a season-ending knee injury, but the year before as a true freshman, very impressive 77.8 run defense grade on 397 snaps that year. And they have plenty of depth in their secondary too. Kobe Black, Cade Phillips, Grayson Littleton at corner, Xavier Filsame at safety, Jonah Williams at safety, and Jordan Johnson-Rebel at safety too. Only Johnson-Rebel, out of all those players I just mentioned, I believe 6 players, only Johnson-Rebel was not a former top 10 recruit at his position coming out of high school. Both Jonah Williams and Cade Phillips were 5-star recruits in the 2025 high school class. So I believe Jonah Williams was the number 1 safety coming out of high school too. So 2 former 5-stars as true freshmen and provide depth for you, and a lot of other former highly rated recruits, and then also 2 stars in Michael Taft and Malik Muhammad in that secondary too.
It says a lot about Texas. They led the nation in coverage grade last year. It was a huge reason they got to the Final Four. What Pete Kwiatkowski is doing with this defense, and the fact that you still have him as the number 1 secondary, despite losing Jahdae Barron, first-round pick, and Andrew Makuba, second-round pick, it just says so much about the talent and the depth of it, right? The top-end guys like Taft and Muhammad, the next wave of guys that they have coming that you mentioned, like McDonald at safety, is a player I really like in run defense. I just think that's going to be the key now. We've seen it. They've gotten this machine rolling on the D-line with NFL talent rolling in every year, but you're getting the same thing in the secondary, and this Texas team very well could be the best coverage team in the country again this season. It makes life a lot easier on a new quarterback in Arch Manning when you know your defense is going to get stops, and we even have to remember this was really the only team all season that shut down Jeremiah Smith and found a way to do that. They got beat because their offense couldn't score enough, execute in the red zone, and then obviously a team like Ohio State's going to put up enough points to give themselves a chance. But no, this Texas defense, we have to remember, even though all the hype's on Manning, that their defense is going to be the reason they win games first and foremost. They can make stops. They were the best team in the country in coverage last year. Very well could be again this year.
Yeah, a loaded defense coming back next year. I know, again, like Dalton said, a lot of the hype will be on Arch Manning, deservedly so, but that defense is going to be loaded once again. Maybe at least a top 3 to 5 defense in college football going next year, if not number 1. So Texas comes in at my number 1 secondaries list. Kind of recap the top 10 for you guys right now. Honorable mention was Tennessee, number 10, Penn State, number 9, Georgia, number 8, Duke, number 7, Indiana, number 6, Oregon, number 5, Ohio State, number 4, Clemson, number 3, Notre Dame, number 2, Alabama, and number 1, the Texas Longhorns for the best secondary in college football next year. Anything you would change, Dalton, in my top 10? It should be higher, lower, any schools I left out of this list that should be in here?
I think there's a legitimate argument between the top 2, between Texas and Bama, considering the depth of both. I think the rest of it, the order is pretty good because you're talking about once you get to the top, really, really complete teams. I was just going through, too, some other teams that you could think about. The highest coverage grade from last year in the Power 4 that was left out of this list was Bud Clark and the TCU Horned Frogs. Yeah. They've got a good unit. I look at Iowa, you know what? They might not have superstar names this year like Cooper DeJean, but they just execute sort of on well that they're always near the top of this list anyway.
Back,
Takario Davis in Washington, if he has a bounce back, I look at even a team like Colorado. I know they lose Travis Hunter, but you have DJ McKinney coming back. You've got Preston Hodge coming back. It still could be a pretty good secondary. Maybe obviously with the superstar and Hunter gone, not as good as last year, but there's still some talent there to work with. So there's definitely a good number of solid. Illinois is another one too that maybe works their way in there. Xavier Scott and those guys in Illinois, especially as aggressive as they are in man coverage. SMU with the safety pair that they have, but a little weaker at corner. So there's a lot of teams I look at even from the top 30 to 35 of last year that at least had an argument. Wisconsin's still got some veteran players who are good. A lot of arguments in the back end. Illinois might actually be the one that I think about. Maybe could have snuck in there. Maybe even that. I know you wanted to mention Tennessee with McCoy and all of that, but Illinois Illinois is one that a lot of people are going to be watching out for in the Big Ten.
The one that actually just missed out on making it was the Auburn Tigers.
Them too. Yeah.
There's a couple of true sophomores at Auburn, and Jay Crawford and Caleb Harris. They were great as freshmen last year. So I really like what they have. Miami, I think Miami really rebounded the secondary nicely with some.
Iowa State too. I know they lost Darian Porter, but they're always good in coverage
Williams
too.
is a top 10 corner in the country.
Yeah.
He's really good. Florida State, I think, did a decent job. Michigan has a pretty good secondary. Oklahoma, actually got a shout out in the chat. Who was it? Rod Smith, who's actually a shout out Florida. Florida was actually a score I really thought about too. Florida's a really good secondary. Actually, that's one of the question marks for them from last year's team, but I think they actually improved it, or they should be getting a lot better this year.
Let's not forget, I know they had the national title defense the year before. Let's not forget about Michigan either. There, you getting Rod Moore back. You got Jair Hill out there at corner. There's a lot of really good secondaries in college football. I'll tell you this.
Colorado still without Travis Hunter.
Yeah, I mean this is a list. If you made a top 20, it might be hard to narrow it down. I do think though. I think for me, Illinois might stand out to be the one.
Illinois, okay,
because they're really good. When you talk about the amount of man coverage, we've talked about it with Notre Dame a lot, but the amount of man coverage that Illinois plays, and they're still lights out for the most part. That's a really darn good unit Brett Bielema's got there.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at Colorado, I thought about a lot. DJ McKinney coming back for another year. Colton Hood, Preston Hodge still there too. LSU, who brought in Mansour Delane, a lot of people think will be a first-round pick in next year's draft. I like what they did there too.
LSU and Florida are the two where I go. They have the names, but I need to see it. I need to see it because the last 2 years that we've been watching, it's just not been good. The secondary's been the weakest part of both of those teams. I think definitely a theory, but with LSU and the Gators, I need to see it happen. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm at because they're a lot lower in coverage grade than they should be considering the talent they bring in every year.
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good point. And then the other one I want to shout out to is SMU. Who I said Bama has the best safety duo in the country. SMU's right there too, is Isaiah Nakobia and Ahmad Moses. And then I know the cornerbacks aren't as good. Deuce Harmon's a pretty good player, though, at corner too. So SMU still has a really good secondary, mainly because their safety duo of Nakobia and Ahmad Moses is one of the best in college football. Maybe the second best in college football behind Alabama
I may have asked you this before. Does Missouri still have Dalen Carnell? Is he back for one more year or no?
Ooh. I don't know, actually. Let me see.
Because that's one I'm gonna look at it right now. That's one also when you talk about safety pairs because they went.
Yes, he is. He's back.
Carnell and Catalan at Missouri is fun too.
Yeah,
that's another fun secondary. Adding Jalen Catalan from UNLV is another fun one. That's you talk about best. Maybe we should have just done that best safety pairs, or maybe that's an article or something we could do. But you got some really fun ones. Catalan and Carnell there at Missouri also. That's going to be a fun defense to watch.
Yeah, definitely. But that wraps up my top 10 secondaries in college football. Also wraps up my top 10 position units in college football going into next year. We broke down all the top 10 players in the country at every position. Now we just broke down all the top 10 units in the country. Big one coming on Thursday, Dawn. We are going over the PFF College 50, which means we'll be going over the top 50 players in college football heading into next year, regardless of position. Who is the best player in college football going into next year? We'll reveal all of that on Thursday on this live show, live at 1 p.m. with unveiling the PFF College 50. And then after that, going into team previews, starting with the SEC going into next year too. So a lot of great stuff coming on this channel. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of that great content coming very, very soon. For producer Eli back there, for Dalton Wassman, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys on Thursday to unveil the top 50 players in college football heading into the 2025 season.